Please, we'll leave. Just don't call anyone. A single dad bought an abandoned farmhouse to escape the ghosts of his past. 3 little girls broke into it because they had nowhere else to go. When he found them hiding in the shadows, hungry, terrified, and desperate, he faced a choice. Turn them in, or let 3 strangers save his life. This is the story of how broken people become family. Before we continue, please tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. Blake Porter stood in the doorway of the old farmhouse, his truck keys still in his hand. The late afternoon light filtered through cracked windows, casting long shadows across the dusty wooden floors. He'd bought this place 3 months ago. A foreclosure nobody wanted, 5 hours outside the city. Far enough from everything, far enough from the memories. He was here to check on the property before starting renovations. Maybe next month. Maybe never. He hadn't decided yet. But something was wrong. The front door, he'd locked it last time. Now it hung slightly ajar. Blake pushed it open slowly. The hinges creaked. He stepped inside, listening. The house was supposed to be empty, silent, forgotten. Instead, he heard breathing. His eyes adjusted to the dim light. In the far corner of the living room, behind an overturned table, 3 small figures curled together on the floor, covered by a single threadbare blanket. Blonde curls spilled across makeshift pillows, old coats bundled up. Their faces were dirty, peaceful in sleep. Children. 3 little girls sleeping in his abandoned farmhouse. Blake's boot scraped against the floor. All 3 pairs of eyes flew open. They scrambled backward, pressing against the wall, clutching each other. Fear, pure, raw fear, flooded their faces. The one in the middle stood up first, positioning herself in front of the other 2. Her chin trembled, but she lifted it anyway. Her voice came out desperate and cracking. "Please, we'll leave. Just don't call anyone." Blake stood frozen, his mind trying to catch up with what he was seeing. These weren't teenagers sneaking in for a dare. These were children, little kids, 7, maybe 8 years old. "How long have you been here?" His voice came out rougher than he meant it to. The girl who'd spoken swallowed hard. "A few weeks." "A few weeks?" She nodded quickly. "We didn't break anything. We were really careful. We just needed somewhere to sleep. Somewhere dry." Blake ran a hand through his short brown hair. This couldn't be happening. He'd come here for peace, for emptiness, for escape. Not this. "Where are your parents?" The question seemed to drain something out of the girl. Her shoulders sagged. "Gone." "Gone where?" "Just gone." Blake looked at the 3 of them. Really looked. Same blonde curly hair, same green eyes wide with terror, same thin faces that spoke of too many missed meals. "What are your names?" The girl hesitated, then answered quietly. "June. That's May," she pointed to the girl on her left, "and that's Ivy, the smallest one on her right." Clutching a ratty stuffed rabbit. "How old are you?" 7. All of us." "All of you?" "We're triplets," May said softly, "born 3 minutes apart." Triplets? 7 years old, living in an abandoned farmhouse? Blake crouched down slowly, trying not to spook them further. "I'm Blake. This is my house." "We know," June said quickly. "We thought it was abandoned. We didn't know anyone was coming back. We'll go, just please don't call the police." The desperation in her voice hit Blake like a fist to the chest. "Why not?" June's eyes filled with tears she was fighting hard not to shed. "Because we can't go back. We can't." Blake felt the air leave his lungs. He should walk away. Call the authorities. Let someone who knew what they were doing handle this. But looking at these 3 small girls, clinging to each other like it was the only thing keeping them alive, something in his chest cracked open. "When did you eat last?" The girls exchanged glances. "We're okay," June lied. Blake stood up. "I'm going to get food. You stay here." "You're not calling—" "I'm not calling anyone. Not yet. Just stay here."
He walked out before they could respond, before he could change his mind, before he could think too hard about what he was doing. Blake returned 40 minutes later with bags from the diner in town. Burgers, fries, chicken tenders, apple juice boxes. The girls were exactly where he'd left them, huddled together like they expected him to come back with police. When they saw the food, their eyes went wide. "Eat," Blake said, setting the bags down. They didn't need to be told twice. They tore into the food like starving animals, and Blake realized that's probably what they were. Starving, desperate, abandoned. He sat on the floor across from them, watching them eat, trying to figure out what the hell he was supposed to do. When they'd finished every last fry, June wiped her mouth and looked at him. "Thank you. You going to tell me what's really going on?" June looked at her sisters, took a shaky breath, and started talking.
Our mom died 6 months ago. She had cancer. It took a long time. Blake's chest tightened. "I'm sorry." June nodded, her eyes distant. "Our dad, he was never around. Even when Mom was alive, he'd disappear for days. Gambling, mostly. After she died, it got worse. He'd leave us alone for weeks. The power got shut off. We ran out of food. We were just alone." "What about your relatives? No one took you in after your mother died?" Blake asked softly. "No," June murmured. "Mom didn't have any siblings, and her parents died when she was young. Our dad's brothers and sisters, they didn't want us. They said we'd be a burden." Blake's chest tightened. These two 7-year-olds had endured more pain than most adults ever would. May picked at her sleeve. "People started noticing. Teachers, neighbors. We knew someone would call social services soon. And then they'd split you up," Blake said quietly. "Yeah," June's voice cracked. "But before Mom died, in the hospital, she made us promise. She held all our hands and said, 'You stay together, no matter what. You're sisters, you protect each other.' We promised her. We can't break that promise." Ivy spoke for the first time, her voice barely a whisper. "Mama said families don't give up on each other."
Blake had to look away. He knew about promises made to the dying. He'd made one himself, on a hospital bed a year ago, holding his wife's hand while machines beeped around them. "Take care of our boy, Blake. Keep him safe." He'd tried, but safe wasn't enough when a drunk driver ran a red light on a Tuesday morning while Blake stayed home to fix a stupid leaking pipe. "So you ran," Blake said. June nodded. "We took a bus 3 hours away. We figured no one would recognize us here. We slept under benches at first, behind buildings, ate whatever we could find in dumpsters behind restaurants." Her voice was matter-of-fact, like she was describing a normal Tuesday. "Then there was a big storm one night. We were soaking wet, freezing. We saw this house. The back window was loose. We climbed in. It was dry, quiet, empty. We thought maybe we could stay for a few days." "That was 3 weeks ago," Blake said. "Yeah." Blake leaned back against the wall. 3 weeks. These kids had been living here for 3 weeks, and he had no idea. "Your father, you know where he is now?" June's face hardened. "Some casino, probably. He doesn't care where we are. He never did." Blake closed his eyes. This was insane. These weren't his kids. This wasn't his responsibility. He'd come here to be alone, to figure out how to keep living when every breath felt like he was betraying the family he'd lost. But when he opened his eyes, 3 small faces were staring at him with the kind of hope that was almost painful to see.
"Please," June whispered, "just let us stay tonight. It's supposed to rain. We'll leave in the morning. We won't bother you again." Blake looked at them, really looked. At their matted hair and dirty faces, at their thin arms and the fear in their eyes, at the way they held on to each other like letting go meant drowning. He thought about his son, Caden, who'd been 7 when he died, who'd loved building pillow forts and asking impossible questions about space, who'd never gotten the chance to turn 8. "You can stay," Blake heard himself say. The relief that washed over June's face nearly broke him. "Tonight," he added quickly. "We'll figure out tomorrow when it comes. But as Blake watched the girls curl up together under their thin blanket, exhaustion pulling them back toward sleep, he had a sinking feeling that tomorrow wouldn't be nearly as simple as tonight. Blake spent that night in his truck, parked in the driveway. He couldn't leave. What if something happened? What if they ran? What if they needed something? But he also couldn't stay inside. It felt too real. He stared at the farmhouse through the windshield as rain started to patter against the roof. Inside those walls were 3 little girls who should be home with parents who loved them, should be safe and fed and tucked into warm beds. Instead, they were sleeping on a cold floor, clinging to each other because it was all they had. Blake pulled out his phone. He should call someone. Child services, the police, someone who knew how to handle this properly. His finger hovered over the screen. Then he thought about what June had said, the promise to their dying mother, the fear of being torn apart. He put the phone away. The next morning, Blake woke to sun streaming through the truck windows. His neck ached from sleeping slumped in the driver's seat. He climbed out, stretching, and walked toward the farmhouse. Inside, the girls were awake, sitting together near the window, talking in hushed voices. They jumped when he entered. "Morning," Blake said. "Morning," June replied, carefully, like she was waiting for him to tell them to leave. "You like eggs?" The girls blinked at him. "I'm asking if you like scrambled eggs." "We like anything," May said softly. Blake almost smiled. "All right, let's see what I can do." The farmhouse kitchen was barely functional. Ancient stove, cracked counters, no running water yet. But Blake had bought some supplies from the convenience store on the way back last night. He managed to scramble eggs in a dented pan he'd found in one of the cabinets. The girls ate in silence, sitting on the floor because there was no table, no chairs, just an empty house that Blake had planned to renovate someday. When they finished, Blake sat down across from them. "So, here's the deal," he said. "I can't just let you keep living here like this. You're 7 years old. You need school. You need to see a doctor. You need more than this." Ivy's face went hard. "We're not going to foster care." "I didn't say foster care." "Then what are you saying?" "Good question." Blake wasn't entirely sure himself. "I'm saying we need to figure this out, properly, legally." "How?" "I don't know yet." June studied him with those sharp green eyes. "Why are you helping us?" "Because someone should," Blake said simply. It wasn't much of an answer, but it was the truth. That day, Blake went into town and bought supplies. Air mattresses, sleeping bags, pillows, basic toiletries, clothes that might actually fit. The girls watched with wide eyes as he carried everything inside. "You don't have to do this," June said quietly. "Yeah, I do." "Why?" Blake didn't answer. He wasn't sure he could put it into words. He just knew that walking away wasn't an option anymore. Over the next few days, a strange routine formed. Blake would drive into town each morning to get food. He'd fix small things around the farmhouse, the leaking roof, the broken window, the busted front step. The girls stayed quiet, watching him like they were waiting for him to disappear. But he kept coming back. Slowly, carefully, they started to relax around him. One afternoon, Blake found June trying to cook something on the stove. She was standing on a chair, frowning at a pot of boiling water. "What are you making?" he asked. She jumped, startled. "Oh, pasta? I think." "You think?" "Mama used to make it. I'm trying to remember how much water she used." Blake stepped beside her. "Mind if I help?" June hesitated, then nodded. Together, they figured it out. The pasta was a little overcooked, and the jar sauce was bland, but when all 4 of them sat on the floor and ate together, something settled in Blake's chest. It felt like dinner, like family, like something he thought had died a year ago. A week passed, then 2.
Blake found himself spending more time at the farmhouse. He told himself it was just to make sure the girls were okay, to fix things up, to figure out what to do. But the truth was, the emptiness that had been suffocating him for a year felt a little lighter when he was here.
The girls were starting to talk more, to smile, to act like kids instead of survivors. One evening, May found an old guitar in the attic, covered in dust and cobwebs. She dragged it downstairs, her eyes bright. "Do you play?" she asked Blake. "Used to. Long time ago. Will you play something?" Blake hesitated. He hadn't touched a guitar since before the accident. Music hurt too much. Reminded him of Emma, who used to sing while he played. Reminded him of Caden, who'd bang on toy drums off beat and laugh when Blake tried to teach him rhythm. But May was looking at him with such hope that he couldn't say no. He tuned the strings as best he could and played something simple, something soft. The notes filled the farmhouse, and for a moment, Blake forgot about the pain. When he finished, all three girls were smiling. "That was really pretty," Ivy whispered. Blake's throat tightened. "Thanks, kid." 2 months in, Blake realized something had shifted. He was sleeping at the farmhouse now, on an air mattress in what used to be the master bedroom. The girls had their own room down the hall, 3 sleeping bags lined up side by side, because they refused to sleep apart. He'd gotten the electricity turned on properly, fixed the plumbing, bought a table and chairs from a thrift store, started making the house livable. And the girls, they were laughing now, really laughing. June had started helping him with repairs, handing him tools and asking questions about everything. May played the guitar every night before bed, getting better with each attempt. Ivy drew pictures constantly, mostly of 4 people standing in front of a house, holding hands. Blake kept every single one. One night, he realized he'd gone a full day without thinking about the accident, without being crushed by guilt, without feeling like he was betraying Emma and Caden by still being alive. He was in the kitchen washing dishes when it hit him. He'd laughed today, actually laughed, at something silly June said, at May's off-key singing, at Ivy's drawing of a horse that looked more like a blob. He hadn't laughed in a year. But with these 3 little girls in his house, it was easier. The grief was still there. It would always be there. But it wasn't the only thing anymore. Blake knew what he was doing was illegal. He had essentially taken in 3 runaway children without contacting authorities. If anyone found out, he could face serious consequences. But every time he thought about calling social services, he remembered the fear in June's eyes, the way all 3 of them clung to each other, the promise they'd made to their dying mother. He couldn't do that to them. The bond between them was growing deeper. It was gradual, a slow building of trust that couldn't be rushed, but it was real. June started calling him Blake instead of Mr. May would sit beside him while he played guitar, trying to copy his finger positions. Ivy began leaving her drawings in places she knew he'd find them, on his pillow, by the coffee maker, tucked into his truck. And Blake started to care. Really care, about whether they were eating enough, about whether they were safe, about whether they were happy. One Saturday, he took them into town. A risk, but they needed clothes that fit properly. At the thrift store, the girls tried on outfit after outfit, giggling in the dressing room. It was the most normal thing Blake had done in months. As they walked out with bags of clothes, June looked up at him. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not treating us like we're problems." Blake stopped walking. "You're not problems." "Everyone else thought we were." "Then everyone else was wrong." June smiled, a real, genuine smile that lit up her whole face. And Blake realized something terrifying. He didn't want them to leave. 3 months after finding the girls, Blake was woken in the middle of the night by sounds from down the hall. Crying. He sat up immediately, heart pounding. He threw on a shirt and walked quickly to the girls' room. The door was cracked open. Inside, he could hear June's voice, thick with tears. "We have to stay together, no matter what. We promised Mama. We promised." Blake pushed the door open gently. All 3 girls were awake, sitting up in their sleeping bags, crying. June had her arms around her sisters.
"Hey," Blake said softly. "What's wrong?" They all jumped, startled. June wiped her eyes quickly. "Nothing. We're fine."
"You're not fine. You're crying." June looked at her sisters, then back at Blake. We were talking about Mama, and what if you decide you don't want us here anymore? What if you send us away and they separate us? What if we can't keep our promise?" Blake's heart broke. He walked over and sat down on the floor beside them. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "I'm not sending you anywhere. But you could. Any day you could decide we're too much trouble and—" "You're not trouble. But what if—" June waited until she looked at him. "I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you. Any of you." "You mean that?" May whispered. Blake looked at each of them. At June, fierce and protective. At May, sweet and hopeful. At Ivy, quiet and observant. These three little girls who'd been failed by every adult in their lives. Who'd survived on their own because they had no other choice. Who'd found his empty house and somehow made it home. He thought about the last 3 months, about how the farmhouse felt alive again, about how he'd started cooking real meals and fixing things and waking up with purpose, about how these girls had cracked open the shell around his heart without even trying. He thought about Emma and Caden, about the family he'd lost, about the guilt that had been drowning him. And then he thought about the promise he'd made to Emma in the hospital. "I'll keep him safe." He'd failed. He'd failed so completely that it had nearly destroyed him. But maybe he could keep a different promise to 3 little girls who needed someone to fight for them. "Yeah," Blake said, his voice rough with emotion. "I mean it. We're a family now, and families don't give up on each other." Ivy launched herself at him, wrapping her small arms around his neck, then May, then June, who was crying harder now. Blake held all 3 of them, and something that had been broken inside him for a year started to heal. The next morning, Blake made a decision. He called a lawyer. The conversation was long and complicated. The lawyer, a patient woman named Janet, explained that the situation wasn't simple. The girl's father would need to be located, his parental rights would need to be legally addressed, there would be investigations, home visits, background checks. "And if I wanted to adopt them?" Blake asked. Janet was quiet for a moment. "That's a lengthy process, Blake. Could take a year or more, and there's no guarantee. But it's possible? Yes. If their father relinquishes his rights, and if you pass all the evaluations, then yes, it's possible. Then let's start." He hired her that day. That evening, he sat the girls down at their thrift store table. "I need to tell you something," he said. June's face went pale. "You're sending us away." "No, the opposite." Blake took a breath. "I talked to a lawyer today. I'm going to adopt you, all 3 of you, officially, legally." The room went absolutely silent. "You, what?" June whispered. "I want to be your dad, if that's okay with you." May started crying. Ivy clutched her rabbit to her chest. June just stared at him like she couldn't process the words. "You mean it?" she finally asked. "I mean it." "But why? We're not your kids." Blake smiled. "Yeah, you are. You've been my kids since the day I found you sleeping in my farmhouse and decided I wasn't going to let anything bad happen to you." June burst into tears. Then all 3 girls were crying and hugging him, and Blake was crying too, and for the first time since the accident, he felt like he had a future. The legal process was slow and exhausting. Social workers came to the house every 2 weeks. They watched Blake with the girls, cooking, helping with homework, reading bedtime stories. They asked questions, took notes, evaluated everything. The girl's father was located in a motel 2 towns over. When a caseworker asked if he wanted custody of his daughters, he signed the paperwork relinquishing his rights without even reading it. Didn't ask where they were. Didn't ask if they were okay. Blake wanted to be angry, but mostly he just felt sad for the man. Sad that he'd thrown away something so precious.
The months dragged on. There were more interviews, more home visits, more paperwork. But through it all, life continued. Blake enrolled the girls in the local elementary school. Watching them get on the bus that first morning, wearing their new backpacks and clean clothes, smiling and nervous, it was one of the best moments of his life. He taught them to ride bikes on the gravel driveway. They planted a small garden in the spring. He helped with math homework and braided hair and made lunches. He learned what it meant to be a father again. And every night, before bed, the girls would hug him and say, "Good night, Dad." It never got old. 9 months after Blake first called the lawyer, he stood in a courthouse holding legal documents that would change everything. The judge smiled warmly. "Mr. Porter, it's clear from everything I've reviewed that you've provided these girls with a stable, loving home. The social workers' reports are glowing. The girls themselves are thriving. It's my honor to finalize this adoption." Blake's hands shook as he accepted the papers. June, May, and Ivy stood beside him in matching dresses they'd picked out together. "Blue like the sky," they'd said. When the judge officially declared them June Porter, May Porter, and Ivy Porter, the girls threw their arms around Blake. "We're really yours now?" June whispered. "You were always mine," Blake said, his voice breaking. "This just makes it official." They went home, to their home, and celebrated. Blake ordered pizza. They made a cake from a box mix that came out lopsided, and they laughed until their stomachs hurt. That night, as Blake tucked them into their real beds, he'd bought them proper beds with actual mattresses, June grabbed his hand. "Thank you," she said, "for not calling the police that first day, for giving us a chance, for everything." Blake squeezed her hand. "Thank you for saving me." "We saved you?" "Yeah, you did. I was lost before I found you. You gave me a reason to keep going." June hugged him tight. "I'm glad we broke into your farmhouse." Blake laughed. "Yeah, me too." 4 years passed like water flowing downstream. The farmhouse transformed completely. Blake had renovated every room, painted walls, refinished floors, built a real porch. The garden had expanded. There were bikes in the yard and a swing hanging from the old oak tree. The girls grew like wildflowers. At 11, they were smart, confident, full of life. June was organized and driven, already talking about becoming a teacher someday. May had real talent with music. Blake had bought her a better guitar for her birthday, and she practiced every day. Ivy covered every available surface with artwork, and Blake had framed her favorites on the walls. Blake had learned to braid hair in 3 different styles. He knew how to help with science projects and mediate sister arguments and make the world's best chocolate chip pancakes. He'd learned to be a father again, and it felt right. One Saturday morning, Blake walked into the town bakery for his usual coffee. Behind the counter was a woman he'd never seen before. Brown, wavy hair, warm blue eyes, a smile that made the whole room feel lighter. "Morning," she said. "What can I get you?" "Just coffee, black." Bold choice. Blake smiled. "I'm a simple guy." "Are you?" "I find that's usually code for, I'm actually very complicated but don't want to explain it before coffee." Blake laughed. Actually laughed. "Maybe you're right. I'm Maria, by the way. First week here." "Blake, I've been coming here for years." "Then welcome back, even though I had nothing to do with your previous visits." There was something easy about her, something warm. Blake found himself lingering longer than he meant to. "You new in town?" "Just moved from 2 counties over. Fresh start and all that." "I know something about fresh starts." Maria's smile softened. "Yeah? How's it going?" "Better than I expected."
Blake left with his coffee and a strange, unfamiliar feeling in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. He came back the next Saturday, and the one after that, always for coffee, always with an excuse to talk a little longer. Maria was funny and kind and easy to talk to. She didn't pry about his past, but she listened when he wanted to share. One day, Blake mentioned the girls. "I have 3 daughters," he said. "Adopted them a few years ago." Maria's face lit up. "Really? That's wonderful." "They're amazing kids. Best thing that ever happened to me." "I'd love to meet them sometime." Blake's heart skipped. "Yeah, I'd like that." A month later, Blake brought the girls to the bakery. They were nervous. Blake could tell from the way June kept straightening her shirt and May wouldn't stop talking. But Maria was perfect with them. She asked about school, music, and art. She complimented Ivy's drawing of the farmhouse. She laughed at May's jokes. As they left, June whispered to Blake, "I like her." "Yeah?" Blake said, trying to keep his voice casual. "Yeah, she's nice, and she made you smile a lot." Blake realized his daughter was right. He had been smiling. A lot. Over the next year, Blake and Maria's friendship deepened into something more. They went on dates, sometimes just the two of them, sometimes with the girls. Maria never tried to replace the mother the girls had lost. She just loved them exactly as they were.
And when Maria told Blake she loved him, standing in the farmhouse kitchen on a random Tuesday evening, Blake said it back without hesitation. When Blake proposed a year later, the girls helped him plan it. They picked out flowers, helped choose the ring, and hid behind bushes to watch when Blake got down on one knee in the town park. Maria said yes. The girls cheered so loud that everyone in the park turned to look. Blake and Maria married on a beautiful autumn day in the farmhouse backyard. The trees were gold and red. The air was crisp and perfect. June, May, and Ivy stood beside them as bridesmaids, wearing dresses they'd helped pick out. They held hands and grinned throughout the entire ceremony. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," the girls whooped and clapped. Maria became mom gradually. She didn't rush it. She let the girls come to her in their own time. And they did. Within months, Ivy was showing Maria her paintings. May was playing songs for her. June was asking her advice about school drama. The family grew together, naturally and beautifully. 2 years later, Maria told Blake she was pregnant. The girls screamed with excitement. They immediately started planning. Names, nursery colors, who got to hold the baby first. Lucas Porter was born on a snowy December evening. 13-year-olds June, May, and Ivy crowded to the hospital room arguing over who got to hold their baby brother first. Blake watched his daughters with their new brother and felt overwhelming gratitude. His family, the one he thought he'd lost forever, had found him in the most unexpected way. In an abandoned farmhouse where 3 scared little girls had taught him that broken hearts could heal if you let them. Lucas grew up surrounded by love. His big sisters doted on him endlessly. June read him bedtime stories in funny voices until he giggled himself to sleep. May played soft guitar while he napped, and he'd wake up smiling. Ivy painted a mural of stars and moons and planets on his nursery wall. When Lucas learned to walk, all 3 girls cheered. When he spoke his first word, Mama, they cried happy tears. When he started preschool, they made him a good luck card covered in glitter. Blake would watch them together and think about how far they'd all come. From that first day when he'd found 3 terrified girls sleeping in his empty house, from the nights when they'd cried about broken promises, from the slow, careful building of trust. They'd built something beautiful, something real. The years flowed forward. Birthdays, holidays, graduations, first crushes and heartbreaks, college applications, Lucas's first day of kindergarten, then middle school, then high school.
June became a teacher, just like she'd always wanted. She worked at the same elementary school she'd attended. May pursued music, playing in coffee shops and small venues, building a following. Ivy became an artist, selling paintings at local galleries. But no matter how far they traveled, or how busy life got, they always came home to the farmhouse. For Sunday dinners, for holidays, for no reason at all except that it was home. Lucas grew into a good kid, funny, kind, smart. His sisters treated him like a celebrity. They showed up to every school play, every soccer game, every important moment. And Blake got to watch it all. Got to be there for every milestone. Got to be the father he'd thought he'd never be again. 25 years after Blake Porter found 3 little girls sleeping in his abandoned farmhouse, the family gathered for a portrait. The farmhouse stood behind them, strong and proud. The garden was in full bloom. The porch swing swayed gently in the breeze. June, May, and Ivy stood with their own families. June had 2 kids, May had 1, and Ivy was pregnant for her first. Their husbands stood beside them, smiling. Lucas, home from college for the summer, stood tall beside his sisters. They still teased him relentlessly, and he loved every second of it.
Blake stood in the center, his arm around Maria. His hair was more gray than brown now. His face was lined with years of laughter and worry and love, but his smile was full and real. The photographer adjusted his camera. "Okay, everyone, big smiles on 3. 1, 2, 3. Click. As the family broke apart, laughing and talking, June walked over to Blake. She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes shining. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not calling the police that day, for giving us a chance, for everything." Blake's throat tightened. "Thank you for breaking into my farmhouse and refusing to leave." June laughed, tears streaming down her face. "Best decision we ever made." May and Ivy joined them, wrapping their arms around their father. Then Lucas piled on, then Maria, then the grandkids, giggling as they climbed onto the group hug. Blake closed his eyes, surrounded by the people he loved most. He'd bought this farmhouse to escape, to hide from grief, to be alone. But 3 little girls had taught him something he'd never forget. Sometimes the family you need finds you when you least expect it. And when it does, you hold on tight. You fight for it. You build a life together out of broken pieces and second chances and love that refuses to give up. And you call it home. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, please don't let it end here. Let it remind you kindness still matters, compassion still changes lives, and hope is never wasted. Subscribe and be part of our Soul Lifts Stories family, where every story lifts the spirit and reminds us that light always finds its way back. And if this moment moved you, share it, because sometimes sharing hope is the kindest thing we can do.